This is Hunter Muse.
And this is Chris Snipes, and you are listening
to The Melt.
I, in my stories and novels, often write about counterfeit worlds, semi-real worlds, as well as deranged private worlds, inhabited often by just one person, while meantime the other characters either remain in their own worlds throughout, or are somehow drawn into one of the peculiar ones. This theme occurs in the corpus of my 27 years of writing. At no time did I have a theoretical or conscious explanation for my preoccupation with these pluriform pseudo-worlds, but now I think I understand. What I was sensing was the manifold of partially actualized realities lying tangent to what evidently is the most actualized one, the one which the majority of us, by consensus gentium, agree on. Although originally I presumed that the differences between these worlds was caused entirely by the subjectivity of the various human viewpoints, it did not take me long to open the question as to whether it might not be more than that in fact plural realities did exist superimposed onto one another like so many film transparencies. What I still do not grasp, however, is how one reality out of the many becomes actualized in contradistinction to the others. Although originally I presumed that the differences between these worlds was caused entirely by the subjectivity of the various human viewpoints, it did not take me long to open the question as to whether it might not be more than that in fact plural realities did exist superimposed onto one another like so many film transparencies. What I still do not grasp, however, is how one reality out of the many becomes actualized in contradistinction to the others. Perhaps none does. Or perhaps, again, it hangs on an agreement in viewpoint by a sufficiency of people. More likely the matrix world, the one with the true core of being, is determined by the programmer. He or it articulates, prints out, so to speak, the matrix choice and fuses it with actual substance, the core or essence of reality, that which receives or attains it, and to what degree. That is within the purview of the programmer.
That was Philip K. Dick speaking in Metz, France in 1977. Man, outstanding stuff. Insane that he was on about all of that in the 70s. Philip was a man that seems to have been born at least 50 years too soon. As someone commented in regards to this video online, quote, "When you're one step ahead of the crowd, you're a visionary. When you're 2 steps ahead, you're considered insane," unquote. That can come as an accusation from the outside, or it can come as a feeling from the inside. Feeling out of step with the world because somehow you are able to see above the fray. Peeling back the somnambulistic layers to reveal the core essence of what this reality may actually consist of. Today's guest, Tessa B. Dick, was the last wife of Philip K. Dick, who had a son with him and helped him with many of the books for which he would later become famous for. She has written many books on her own, including many about her time with Phil. Hunter and I recently had the honor of having a chat with Tessa, and this is what ensued.
Hello.
Tessa.
Yep.
How are you?
Been better, been worse.
This is Chris, just in case. I guess I should formally introduce myself. Chris from The Melt and my wife, Hunter.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm so thrilled to meet you, albeit via the phone. I was wondering how your kitties are.
Oh, they're busy chasing an automated laser pointer.
Automated? I've never heard.
Yeah,
I've never heard of that before.
a friend gave me this gadget. It's battery powered, and it saves me a lot of carpal tunnel.
Oh, that's good.
Because they have a lot of stamina, they can do that for a long time. Chase the light.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And there's 3 of them at the moment going after it.
You still have Tora?
Oh yeah, and she doesn't like having all these intruder cats in her house.
Oh, I bet. I bet.
I didn't go and get them; they just moved in.
They'll do that. Did you put out food? Was food drawing them in, or is it just your good vibes?
Oh, no, feral cat had kittens under my house,
Uh-huh.
and then the cat disappeared.
Gotcha.
They were probably weaned when she disappeared.
Mm.
Well, that's good at
So,
least.
they smelled food and came right in.
I bet.
Opportunists.
My best friend lives in Compton, and she drives around and has a whole series of ferals that she takes care of, and has been able to catch a couple and have them neutered and spayed and then puts them back out. But she's been able to adopt out 32 cats so far. So,
Wow.
yeah, I mean,
Well-
there's a huge problem with feral cats in Los Angeles.
Oh, yeah. We had a big problem, but then animal control started trapping them. That's probably what happened to Mama Cat.
Mm.
Anyway, I did connect with a local cat charity, and they got them all spayed.
Oh, good.
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 Yeah.
How's the weather?
Cold and windy.
Are you ready for it?
I'm never ready for the devil wind.
Do you have a fairly airtight house?
It's a little drafty, and I like it that way because it's like, say, the heater builds up carbon monoxide, the
Mhm.
draft will give me some oxygen.
That
sure.
helps.
Yes.
I don't want it hermetically sealed.
Yeah, exactly.
No.
It's good to have some contact with the outside world, even if it's
Yeah.
via draft.
Yeah, and I don't trust the smoke detector.
Yeah.
It's supposed to beep if there's carbon monoxide, but it never has.
Yeah, you never know whether those things work or not until it's too late.
Pretty much.
How's your health doing?
Slowly improving.
Good.
Good. Fantastic.
Well, it helped when I got on Medicare and was able to see a real doctor instead of the clinic.
Mm.
I have a doctor who actually discusses the test results with me instead of just, trying to push me into getting a flu shot.
Yeah, exactly.
I haven't had the flu since 1969. I don't think I'm going to get it.
Exactly. Sometimes those things give you the flu.
Yeah.
Yeah, they make you.
I had COVID twice, and all I had was a runny nose.
Good. You must have a good immune system.
Apparently.
Did you lose your sense of smell or taste?
No, for a while things tasted funny, but that went away.
I had it. I lost my sense of smell, and taste, but never my sense of humor or my sense of irony. So that's good.
That is good. Yeah, well, anyway. Yeah, it's been freezing overnight, sometimes below freezing, but I get to stay in, so it's okay.
Good.
Good. Do you have
I don't get sick. I just
do you have
have a really bad back.
but do people bring you food, and like how do you get your supplies and stuff?
Oh, some bring me food and some take me to the store.
Oh, that's
And
good.
yeah, I can, pick things out and put them in the cart, but I can't carry them from the car to the house.
Mm,
Well, it's good that you have help then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's good to live in a small town.
absolutely. I noticed in one of your videos you said you were having some issues with your neighbors. Are they still
They're
raucous?
Well, the neighbors next door are squatters,
Mm-hmm.
mm, but the guy used to date my friend's daughter, so he thinks we're friends.
By proxy.
Yeah. And he's a pretty good guy overall, but he is a convicted felon.
Mm-hmm.
Drugs.
Drugs, yeah. Drug war casualty.
Any
Yeah.
any good drugs, or is it more like a fentanyl?
I think he's kind of given up on drugs because of fentanyl.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
That's
Some nasty
Yeah.
stuff.
He doesn't seem to be on speed anymore.
Oh, good. That's good. So he's not like outside in the summertime or in the winter trying to clip the lawn with a nail file.
No, but I think what the felony was, he committed burglary trying to, get enough money to buy drugs.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, but it's been a couple years.
Sure.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Anyway.
the biggest problem I had was with people who were visiting the neighbors parking in my driveway, which is a big deal. It's a huge driveway. It's sideways. But they'd pull right up to my gate.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm supposed to walk around their car to get in and out of my yard.
Yeah, it's a little rude.
Yeah. They have no common sense and no common courtesy.
It's lacking in some areas these days.
Well, yeah, I shouldn't have to tell them not to block my gate.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's just common sense.
They could at least ask you if it's okay.
Well, there are a few that still park in my driveway, but now they leave, they park away from my gate.
Mm-hmm.
It's like it's inconvenient for them to walk 3 or 4 feet farther.
Yeah, exactly. What are you going to do?
Well, I put up 3 signs, and once in a while I go out and yell at them. I'll say, I'm calling the tow truck.
To no avail.
That usually works.
Oh, good. Well, first of all, Tessa, I would really like to thank you for agreeing to sit down and have a chat with us tonight. I really appreciate that. I feel honored that you agreed to do so. And I would love to.
Well,
Are you good for going a couple of hours?
sure.
Okay.
This Friday, I'm going to do 2 hours
Oh,
at
cool.
like 9 o'clock at night with Solaris Blue Raven.
Oh, nice.
So this is a little easier.
Yeah. I've not heard her show, but I've heard things about it. So would you suggest it?
Yeah.
Listening to it, is it a good show?
Well, I think so.
Yeah. Cool. Well, that says something.
He talks really fast.
Oh.
I've gotten to where I can understand her.
It took some acclimating.
Yeah. She's worse than Ben Shapiro.
Oh,
Oh
God.
wow! Holy moly! That's fast.
I don't like Ben Shapiro, so
Yeah. I agree with some things that he says, but I'm not a big fan of how he says it.
yeah, he seems to have an ego problem.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
If you disagree with him on anything, oh, you're horrible.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Do you spend much time taking in any kind of news or any kind of mainstream media?
Well, sometimes by accident, I end up listening to one of them because when on YouTube, when a video ends, they'll just on my phone, it'll roll over to whatever they think I want to hear.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Or whatever they think
And
was.
you know, I do try to get the weather reports from a variety of stations.
That's a pretty safe bet. The weather report.
Yeah, weather is kind of important on the mountain.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yes, indeed. Well, I am a believer that all things happen for a reason, whether it be a big sort of cosmic reason or something that leads to another chain of events that causes some maybe more important thing to happen or series of events to happen. I know a lot of people talk to you about, of course, your marriage to Philip K. Dick, and I would love to get into that also. But I think because of that meeting that you had, and that's basically, I think, around 10 years that you spent associating with him, whether it be married or after you were married. What about your life before that? What do you think maybe set the stage for that sort of crossing of paths to happen? Because you've had a very interesting life, right?
You could call it that.
You've had a lot of pretty crazy experiences.
Yeah, I did. And our meeting seemed accidental at the time, but I really wonder. I still thought we'd been set up.
Mm-hmm.
And as time goes on and I think it over, yeah, maybe we were.
Well, at least maybe the series of events in your life left you in a state of mind where something like that could happen and you could appreciate it, or you were able to meet it head on.
Oh, I don't know, but as soon as I saw him, I just knew he was the one. At the time he was breaking up with our mutual friend, Ginger. And Ginger was about Phil's age. I was much younger. But Ginger basically was a friend of my mother.
Oh, wow.
They both used to drive school buses for a small private school.
Wow. I did not know that.
Yeah. Anyway, Phil didn't really notice me till I started flirting with him.
That'll do it.
Yeah, but then he was pouring drinks, Jack Daniels and Coke. And I told him to make mine weak because I'm not much of a drinker. And I wasn't really old enough. I was only 18. He made it too strong. Then he got mad when I poured it out on the lawn.
I bet.
Wasting good Jack Daniels.
Is there such a thing? Ugh.
I don't like Jack Daniels.
Yeah, I don't like Jack Daniels.
If I want a drink, which is rare, I'll get Seagram's VO.
Oh,
And since I don't drink often, I can afford it.
right. That makes sense. So I'm curious about your history with writing. Had you ever endeavored into doing any type of writing as a younger person? Was that ever like, were you a journaler, or did you ever kind of delve into any types of short stories?
Oh yeah, I once wrote a story for my baby sister
Oh, wow.
about a little red car that wanted to win a race.
No kidding.
Yeah, and then I started seriously writing articles. I thought I might become a journalist,
Mm-hmm.
maybe interpret scientific papers so, ordinary people could understand them.
It seems like, I'm sorry, go ahead.
They're written so that even scientists have trouble understanding
That's
what
true.
they're out. Yeah.
Well, it seems like you had kind of a tumultuous childhood and a difficult time as you were growing up. Do you feel like that the writing helped you to kind of unpack some of that stuff that was going on in your life?
Not at first, but as I became an adult and took some courses in college, yeah, I was able to work some things out in journals
Mm-hmm.
and eventually in fiction. But see, my school teachers had told my mother what a good writer I was and she should encourage that.
Mm-hmm. So
she went to the library and checked out a dozen books on writing and expected me to read them in 2 weeks. Because that's how long you can keep a library book.
Right.
She did actually get me a subscription to the Writer's Digest.
Nice.
Cool.
That's great.
See, I didn't have an allowance. I didn't get paid for doing chores.
Mm-hmm.
And she wouldn't let me do chores for the neighbors because something terrible might happen to me.
Mm.
She was really weird. When I was 17, she wouldn't let me get a job because I might have to cross a busy street to get to work.
Mm-hmm. Overprotective.
I didn't drive. She wouldn't allow me to get any driver training.
Mm-hmm.
Did that come from some series of bad experiences from her past? Why do you think she was so overprotective?
I consider it more being imprisoned than protected.
Mm-hmm.
But she was insane and alcoholic.
Oh, yeah.
Well, you're also a very beautiful woman. And so she probably on some level thought that imprisoning you was a way of protecting your chastity or protecting you from the outside world.
Rapunzel.
Well, up to a point, but when I was 16, she was actually yelling at me for not having sex.
Really?
Interesting.
Yeah. One time, some friends of my stepsister were staying at our house.
Uh-huh.
One of them was a really good-looking boy, and she was yelling at me that I turned him off.
What?
I didn't say this, but I was thinking, Mom, he's gay. Couldn't turn him on if I tried. She often picked out gay men for me.
Wow. Interesting. Wow. Her picker must be off.
And where did she grow up?
Mostly Culver City.
Oh, yeah? So
I was born there. We lived there till I was 11.
Did she was she working in the business at all, or that was just where she happened to be?
No, that's where she grew up. And for a couple years, 3 years, I think, we were living in the house where she grew up.
Wow.
And my dad had broken his back, and so while he was recovering, he couldn't work because he'd been doing heavy physical labor. And so we moved into that house, which my grandparents still owned while he was recovering.
And so did they stay together throughout your childhood?
Oh, yeah. Dad always loved her. I don't know why. But he was just, I guess the best word is besotted.
Oh.
No matter how badly she treated him, he just loved her.
So growing up, did you have any sort of anomalous or unexplained experiences?
Oh, tons.
Yeah? I mean, like paranormal experiences or?
Oh, yeah. And some really weird things that probably had something to do with MK Ultra.
Do tell.
From very early childhood, probably around 2 years old, I actually had an angel sitting behind my shoulder talking to me.
Like all the time?
Not all the time, but it was, most of it was just ordinary stuff. Like I'd hear my dad's car in the driveway, and instead of me thinking I'd better get off Dad's chair, the angel would tell me, "Your daddy's home, you better get off his chair."
Interesting.
Yeah, common sense advice.
Was this sort of like a disembodied voice coming from behind you, or could you turn around and actually see some entity there?
I don't remember seeing him, but I kind of imagined or pictured what he looked like until when we moved to my grandparents' house. He came and I saw him face to face, and he told me, "You're 8 years old now. If you have an angel talking to you, people will think you're crazy. So I have to go away."
Interesting. I mean, was it like you were telling anybody about your conversations with the angel?
No, I had learned not to.
Sure.
But my older brother and I both experienced very frightening hauntings.
In a particular place or sort of wherever you guys lived?
Usually in the bedroom, but both houses, the first one and then my grandparents' house. It was worse in my grandparents' house. I kind of think maybe my mother's demons thought they had a claim on her children. I've heard Father Malachi Martin talking about that with Art Bell. So you have to stand up and tell them, "No, you don't have a claim on me."
Which is a lot for a kid to do.
Yeah, well, I didn't learn that till I was an adult listening to Art Bell.
Oh,
right.
Wow.
So did any member of your family have any association with the military?
Not really. The only thing I can think of is Dad made some of the parts for a Gemini capsule.
Wow.
One of the first Gemini capsules. And he couldn't talk about it. He had to have security clearance and was sworn to silence.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember going to a family picnic at his work where they showed a mock-up of the capsule, letting us know they had worked on it. But one thing he did talk about without actually saying it was the space capsule was making hinges that would work because the engineers couldn't figure it out. And he was a sheet metal worker, so he said, "Okay, I'll make the hinges that you designed, and we'll see if they work, and if not, we'll fix them so they do."
Mm-hmm.
And he did. And he talked about that without ever saying it was the space capsule, but that's what it had to be.
Sure.
Wow.
Well, what gave you the impression, you said something earlier about MK Ultra, what gave you the impression that some of your experiences had to do with that?
Well, there was this longitudinal experiment on school children.
Mm-hmm.
By Stanley Milgram.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the right name.
Yep.
The one who did the prison experiment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Supposedly it was about the relationship between self-esteem and leadership. And I thought I'd imagined the whole thing, but my older brother eventually, about 10 years ago, just brought it up in conversation. And he remembered things like throwing a beanbag and taking a personality inventory.
Mm-hmm.
I call it the crazy test. The Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory, MMPI.
Yep.
Oh, years later, as an adult, I took the MMPI to help a fellow student with his master's thesis in psychology.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew I'd taken that test before. Couldn't be sure when or where, but it had to be during that study at my grammar school. And the weird thing about it was, they're supposed to get parents' permission to study their children.
Mm-hmm.
My parents never knew about it. They were never asked.
Strange.
But I remembered them doing what had to be remote viewing before it was called that.
Wow. Yeah. Philip Zimbardo did the Stanford prison experiment. Stanley Milgram was the psychologist who did the experiment with people when they were in separate rooms to see if they would electric shock someone.
Oh, well, that's even more horrible.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes, some of their test subjects went insane
Mm-hmm.
from the trauma.
Yeah, it had really, really long-term effects on a lot of people who were involved in both experiments, both Stanford prison experiment and the social psychological experiments that he did. It's the obedience to authority experiment.
Oh, well, I got kicked out of the study because I was too disobedient.
Yes. Good for you. You passed.
Yeah, at one point this woman was yelling at me that I was giving the wrong answers on purpose. And I was.
They were on to you.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I would imagine at that point that Los Angeles was a hotbed of lots of different MK Ultra cells and experiments, especially in the school system.
Yep. Oh, well, there was all kinds of weirdness. There was this push to get rid of polio,
Mm-hmm.
so all of us had to have a polio shot every year.
Mm-hmm.
Well, my grandmother took my brothers and me to a private doctor for our shots,
Mm-hmm.
and Mom was furious at the waste of money when
Wow.
the school was giving the shots for free.
Interesting.
Well, Mom was weird that way. She thought my grandmother should just give her money so she could spend it on herself.
What was the common thing that she wanted to spend her money on?
Alcohol, cigarettes, going out.
Vices.
Yeah, pretty much. She was a party girl. She was good looking.
That's where you got it. Your good looks.
Well, she always insisted I looked more like my dad's mother, but anyway. Well, so we got our first shot right before first grade.
Mm-hmm.
In second grade, half of my class wasn't there.
Wow.
The school had a bad batch of the vaccine and they got polio.
Oh.
Holy crap.
That's awful.
Yeah, some died, some were paralyzed.
Jeez Louise.
Yeah.
I wonder how your mother reacted to that, because your grandmother took you to a private doctor.
She was very active in the PTA, so she started forging our vaccination records.
Oh, wow.
Your grandmother did, or your mother?
My mother.
Wow.
Yeah. She would let us take the sugar cube, but not the shot.
Oh, that's a good thing. I mean,
she just didn't trust it after that.
Yeah, understandably.
I don't blame her.
Jeez Louise.
That's wild. So were you educated primarily in the Los Angeles area? Did you stay there?
Through the fifth grade, then the Watts riot happened.
Mm-hmm.
In August of '65, and in September we moved to Anaheim.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was in Orange County for a while.
And the strange experiences followed you there, like the paranormal experiences.
They weren't as bad, but here and there something weird would happen.
Mm-hmm. Did it?
I would see someone walking through the house that I thought was my brother.
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh.
It wasn't. It was just something ghostly.
How did you feel about that? I mean, were you open-minded to things like that to begin with, or did that sort of
that didn't frighten me, but the house, like where Mom grew up,
mm-hmm.
we went back there once. Just my mom and her sister and I went there, and they were just getting a few things out because my grandfather had sold the house.
Mm-hmm.
My grandparents had their own house a couple miles away.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, Mom told me to go get some curtain rods that were in the pantry. And I absolutely could not go into that house. I walked toward it, and about 6 feet from the door, I turned around and said, I can't.
because of just...
But it's stupid that she went and got the curtain rods herself. Well, that pantry seemed to be a focus of ghostly activity, demonic even.
Interesting. That's a strange place for something like that to be centered.
I try not to believe in such things, but it was real to me.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And what did your mom acknowledge that at all? Did she just...
No.
She just dismissed it as your imagination or something?
Exactly.
Uh-huh.
And things that really did happen, she'd tell us we imagined it because, well, for example, my brother and I on different occasions asked, guess Mom and Dad owned a record store, and Mom would be working there, and we'd ask, for example, is that guy gonna come in again?
Mm-hmm.
She was meeting one of her boyfriends there.
Uh-huh.
What guy? You must have been imagining things.
Uh-huh.
Uh-huh.
She's underestimating your powers of observation.
Well, she want Dad to find out.
Sure.
But even when he knew she was cheating on him, it didn't change him.
Was your brother older or younger than you?
I had 2 older brothers and a baby sister who was born when I was 9 years old.
Did this activity that you categorize as demonic, was that happening at the same time ever? Was there any overlap with the angelic experiences?
Well, the angel told me that when we moved, he had to stay at the previous house for a few weeks to stop those demons from following us.
Interesting.
But then when he did arrive at the house we moved into, there were demons he had to deal with there.
Crazy.
And I was not religious. I kind of knew about David and Goliath.
Mm-hmm.
But
the fun stories.
That was about it.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And what is your stance on that now? How do you feel about religion? And
I call myself a Baptist because that's where I got dunked. Because there's 6 kinds of Baptists. You never know what you're going to get in a Baptist church. So I'm basically a non-denominational Christian.
Gotcha.
I didn't really believe in Jesus until I was getting really bad, what they call sleep seizures.
Mm-hmm.
And when they happened, I experienced a figure jumping on me and physically attacking me. And I finally, I'd pray to God to get rid of it and it would go away, but eventually come back. But the last time I called on Jesus Christ to get rid of it, and it hasn't come back.
A lot of people say that, even in encounters that they would classify as sort of extraterrestrial encounters. They call upon Christ or call upon God and or start saying a psalm or a prayer or something, and it stops. Very strange.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah. So did you...
Well,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
All of this kind of prepared me to take Phil seriously when he started having visions.
Mm-hmm.
But a great part of what he was doing, and what I've been doing too, although I did it on purpose, he was recovering suppressed memories.
Suppressed.
He had been pretty much driven out of San Rafael, up in Marin County in Northern California.
Mm-hmm.
They thought he was a big drug dealer, which is horse pucky. But that's what they thought. You know, if you passed him a joint, he would smoke it. That was
Who
about
wouldn't?
it.
Who wouldn't? Do you think they were just trying to
Oh,
defame him because they didn't like what he was doing, or
well, he had this very innocent connection to Timothy Leary. And when Phil's troubles started was when Leary escaped from prison.
because they thought the two were connected?
Yeah, well, Leary was at the bed-in with John Lennon, where they were singing "Give Peace a Chance,"
Yeah.
and Paul Williams, the journalist, was there, and he knew Phil and had his phone number, so he called Phil, and Dr. Leary and John Lennon both told Phil they were fans of his work, and that
Cool.
was the extent of it. But then when Leary escaped from prison, they hadn't been spying on Phil during that time, probably, but they would have been looking at John Lennon's phone records.
Sure.
Go, oh, he got a phone call from the bed-in. Must be helping Leary to evade the law.
Do you think Phil was already on their radar by that time, or do you think that helped to put him on the radar, and then they discovered the kinds of stories that he was writing, and then that maybe a greater interest developed from that?
He probably was sort of on the radar because he signed that petition in Ramparts magazine promising not to pay income taxes until we ended the war in Vietnam.
Yeah.
And he didn't pay, but like there's a list somewhere on the internet. He's one of the people who were forced to pay. They just took his car.
Wow.
So, yeah, he was sort of on their radar, but it got serious right after Leary escaped from prison. And there was this weird guy hanging around with Phil, didn't live in the same house, but would visit. And he claimed to belong to an undercover organization so secret that the CIA didn't know about them.
Interesting.
And he did get Phil out of the house, called him and asked him to meet at a local coffee shop because it was really important. And on the way to the coffee shop, Phil's car broke down. The next day, the mechanic told him it had been sabotaged.
So was this after the series of break-ins started happening?
So this was the day of the big break-in.
Oh, okay. Wow. The one where they came in and exploded the file cabinet?
Yeah, this guy Hal didn't want him in the house when that happened.
So that was all a distraction, and his car was supposed to break down so he would be delayed in getting back to his apartment.
Well, it was a house, not an apartment.
Gotcha.
It was a weird break-in. They left valuables. They took his bank records and his manuscripts.
Wow.
And his tax records.
Interesting.
They tossed all his food onto the kitchen floor out of the cupboards. They emptied the boxes of cereal and pancake mix, and they emptied out the refrigerator onto the floor. But they left an expensive watch and some gold coins and some cash.
Well, I mean, it sounds like they knew what the real treasure was, the manuscripts. Like, that to me, that to me is probably the most valuable thing that would have been in his apartment. But, it's easy to say that in hindsight.
Well, fortunately, Phil had sent a copy of the manuscript of Flow My Tears, the policeman said, to his divorce lawyer. Nancy had left him and filed for divorce. And he He had sent the manuscript for Deus Irae to his co-author, Roger Zelazny.
Mm-hmm.
So those two novels survived.
Good.
But there was a third one that was in progress, and it didn't survive.
Mm.
So what did Phil suspect was behind that break-in, or did he have any ideas about it?
He speculated about everything in the universe. The IRS, the CIA, the FBI, the DEA. That was Nixon's brand new agency, Drug Enforcement Administration.
Uh-huh.
Or it might have been the Russians or the Chinese.
Mm-hmm.
He was leaving all the options open.
But after he fled to Canada, he was a guest of honor at a science fiction convention.
Oh, yeah.
In Vancouver.
Mets?
No, Vancouver, British Columbia.
Yeah, Mets was in France.
Mets was 1977.
Yeah.
The hit house was 71.
Gotcha. Yeah,
sorry. So early 1982, he was in Canada. And one of the memories he recovered was that he'd been kidnapped and drugged and interrogated.
Wow.
He had a headache and he was walking to the pharmacy to get some aspirin.
Mm-hmm.
And two men in black suits shoved him into the back of a limousine. And they drove around Vancouver, the streets of Vancouver he figured it must have been a couple hours, but he couldn't quite remember what they had asked him or what he had said.
Mm-hmm.
And the next thing he knew, he was sitting on the floor of his apartment, and he had just swallowed a whole bottle of sleeping pills.
Wow.
Jesus Christ.
So he called for help, and he said, if this was rotary phones, you turn the dial.
Mm-hmm.
He said if the last number had been anything but a 1, he could not have completed the call.
Mm-hmm.
Jesus. That sounds like he had plenty of reasons to be paranoid.
And there he was, out of money, broke, not a Canadian citizen, so their health care wouldn't cover him.
Mm-hmm.
The only place that would take him was a drug rehab center.
Wow. Well, at least...
so there's a lot of truth in his novel, A Scanner Darkly.
Yeah, for sure.
But he was not an addict. He was one of those annoying people who could smoke a cigarette and then not touch another one for a week.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah, I was kind of like that too with tobacco. So I can relate to that.
Yeah.
So that first break-in, how long before you met him did that happen?
I don't know that was the first break-in.
Oh,
but
okay.
He'd had small break-ins that were probably, there were a lot of young people hanging around because his brother-in-law, Michael,
mm-hmm.
who was much younger, was still living with Phil after Nancy left.
Mm-hmm.
His friends, and he figured they were pilfering a little cash or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing like that ransacking of his house.
Yeah.
I mean, they did unnecessary damage.
Yeah, the ransacking didn't seem like it was, your normal sort of robbery. It seemed like it was, definitely pointed at something, like it had a purpose.
And it was punitive.
Yeah, exactly. Did anything like that happen after you guys crossed paths or while you were married?
Well, nothing like that.
Mm-hmm.
But in our apartment, the previous tenants were 3 college girls that Phil knew because he had been sharing an apartment next door to them with another student, Joel Stein. Anyway, one of them had kept a key, and she used to go into our apartment while we were not at home and just sit in a chair and maybe read a book or something. And we'd come home and a book or a magazine would be out of place. It wasn't where we left it. But Phil figured that out pretty quick. Made her give back the key, and then he complained to the landlady, "You're supposed to change the locks when people move out."
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but, but we had this feeling of surveillance, and then after we'd moved to actually an apartment across the street, because I was about to give birth and the place where we were didn't allow children. So anyway, the apartment next door to us there became vacant, and they didn't rent it out. They filled it with electronic equipment and a working telephone. And I was inclined to believe that our landlord was spying on his wife because it wasn't locked. So I went in and picked up the phone, and I heard these two women talking.
Wild.
I figured, the landlord's spying on his wife. But Phil looked at all the electronic equipment and stuff and thought they were spying on us. Could be.
Yeah. Was it?
It was around the time he started hearing this voice in his head telling him to die.
Interesting.
Maybe an early form of the voice of God technology.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Or have you heard of Jerry Marzinski?
Don't think so.
He is a proper term. Is he a therapist or
He's a psychotherapist?
Psychotherapist, and he has done a lot of work with prisoners and prisoners who get diagnosed as schizophrenic. And he noticed that the treatment that these prisoners were getting, nobody ever really asked them what their voices were actually telling them, what they were actually saying to them. And he started asking them, just started asking handfuls of prisoners, like, so what are these things saying to you? And he found that they were all basically saying different versions of the same thing. They were all very derogatory statements, talking down the person, trying to get them to doubt themselves, just very negative talk. And he came to the conclusion that these were actual objective entities that were sort of harvesting negative energy from these people. A place like a prison was a great place to do that because there was so much negative energy in the whole place. But he thought that the voices people were hearing in their heads were actual entities, objective entities, and not some creation of the person's mind. But voice of God technology, that's an interesting take on it too.
Reminds me of Harry Stack Sullivan. Phil had read about Sullivan. He was a psychiatrist who happened to be schizophrenic. He would go around the wards deliberately thinking bad thoughts about the paranoid patient. And the patient he was thinking about would walk up to him and repeat what he had only thought.
Interesting.
Right.
Wow.
Like, how could you say such a thing about me?
Wow.
Yeah, like there's a wavelength where thoughts can go between, maybe it's the same wavelength that people use for telepathy or for ESP. And like he was
he had the theory that these paranoid patients were picking up on something real that the rest of us didn't detect.
Mm-hmm.
Totally makes sense.
Well, we send you many blessings, and I hope you have a fantastic rest of your evening and holiday season.
Yes. It was great meeting you, Tessa.
Let's see, it's too early for Merry Christmas, so happy Thanksgiving.
Likewise.
Thank you very, very much.
And I will let you know when this episode goes live. We've got quite a few backed up in the queue, but so it might be a bit, but I'll let you know. I'll give you plenty of heads up when it comes out.
Then I can promote it.
Yeah, absolutely. And then we can arrange some other time to have the next conversation.
Okay.
All right, Tessa.
Awesome.
Have a great evening and goodbye.
All right.
Farewell.
Thank you.
The one and only Tessa Dick.
We usually have so many more buttons to push.
I know.
We only
It's
had
great.
one button. It was very
Very streamlined.
extremely streamlined.
Yes.
We
just
are
having
nude,
audio.
by the way. That's why we're not
Psychically
on camera.
nude.
That's why we're not on camera, because we're nude.
Mhm. We're skinny podcasting. Skinny casting. It's a new trend. You don't press. Yeah. The timing. It's all about timing, dear. Oh, Lord.
That was awesome.
Yeah. It was wonderful chatting with her. I felt like we were in her living room with the smell of coffee on the pot.
I am glad that we tried to kind of veer away from just focusing on Phil, because I'm really more interested, and I say that, with all due respect to Phil, but I really wanted to know more about her and her life and her experiences. And she's a California girl, so in many regards I consider us kindred spirits, and it was just really wonderful to hear her take on the time she grew up in California. And I'm fascinated by that period of that whole era in that area, and what was going on, what experiments were being executed on people, and it seems like it was a hotbed.
Yes. I'm interested in both. I am interested in her and her past for sure. But I'm also interested in where her reality and Philip K. Dick's reality overlaps. Mm-hmm. And I don't feel too bad about that, because she has tons of books about Philip K. Dick. So I think on some level, she obviously wants to talk about Philip K. Dick. But yes, I don't want that to be the only conversation that we have, because I'd like to know more about Tessa and where she came from. That's kind of why I started with that question, hoping that would be the main foundation of further conversations about where her and Philip K. Dick's paths crossed.
Yeah, I've always wanted to write a book about writers, because I'm a writer, and I am interested in writers' process. And that was something I neglected to ask her, is what his process was for writing. Did he do specific rituals? I have asked several writers or children of famous writers, how did your dad write? And for example, Amy Wallace, whose father was Irving Wallace, he grew up in a period where there was, cocktail hour at 5. And so, when he woke up in the morning, he was basically taking methamphetamines all day. So he would get up very early and start his day with methamphetamines, drink coffee all day long and write, and then come 5 o'clock, switch to martinis, and then it's dinner and dinner parties, or, dinner and out dancing with your wife. So there's this almost, this very romantic view of the professional writer and the life that they're leading and living. And Phil's work is so powerful that I can only imagine what it may have been like to be in that circumstance with him. And, how did he navigate that? Did he write by himself and then give her pages? Did she write by herself and then give him pages? Like, how did they negotiate those things when they were working on projects together?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was going to ask more about how that manifested as far as their process of.
Sorry.
As far as the process of them writing something together, I think she had a lot to do with the editorial process and some of the aspects of that around the writing. But I think she also contributed to the writing too.
Sure. I mean, I have just worked on a project with our son, and it's very much his project, but part of the editorial process is cleaning up the work and offering suggestions and kind of doing some degree of guidance in that, if things don't make sense, trying to kind of flesh out ideas or tease out ideas. So I'm sure that there was some degree of that from both sides, like Phil reading her work and, the collaboration that they experienced together. And I just, I have so much empathy for people who grieve and who have been through painful losses. And, I just wonder how life is in isolation, because she enjoys living on her own. But there's a side of me that kind of wishes that she lived closer physically and had more of a physical relationship with her son and was able to kind of see him more. I know it would be insane to live in the shadow of such a prolific writer. And that may be very difficult, as she said, that he doesn't want to go out into the world, or he doesn't go out into the world as Philip K. Dick's son. So I think it's probably complicated.
Absolutely, as it always is. Anything in reality is complicated, and it's just ironic, but yet kind of goes along with the stereotype of the person who exists before their time, meaning that they're dealing in things, talking about things, creating things that maybe aren't widely accepted or widely valued in the greater context of the society or the culture that they are steeped in. Mm-hmm. So I think Philip is a perfect example of that. If you just look at his writings, he talks about so many things that are spot on mm-hmm. as to what is happening right now. And yet barely anybody, at least on a mainstream level, is making that sort of connection that he was on to a lot of this stuff mm-hmm. and that maybe a lot could have been learned by reading his books. But, that's the thing about science fiction. It peeks. It's allowed to peek into the future or a version of the future, but it's not... I think that's changing maybe with things like Dark Mirror or Black Mirror. I don't know why I always want to call it Dark Mirror. I'm mixing it with dark. Mm-hmm. But it's never... I don't think it's seen enough as maybe a cautionary tale of things that we should be avoiding. I think now we're so steeped in media, we look at that and basically it takes on almost a different function of maybe potentially, because there's so much of that coming from so many different angles that we're almost numb to it. So we see so much of that stuff, and a lot of it is bullshit, like movies that The Rock is in and stuff like that may talk about some similar things that Phil talked about, but because it gets all lumped into one mushy category, it's all written off as just like, Yeah, who knows? Maybe that could happen, maybe it couldn't. And when things like that do happen, people are so like, it doesn't surprise me. It breeds a cynicism that is a disconnection between, being able to create something that is really of a genius stature at the time, and it just going completely under the radar. And then later it gets picked up and turned into movies that take these stories and water them down and dilute them into something that's sort of recognizable, kind of have a little bit of the flavor of what the original stories had, but it's kind of, and maybe that's why it didn't, because that's most people's exposure to Philip K. Dick's work is the movies, is the bad adaptations of his stuff.
I think that he was lauded as a genius when he was alive.
You think so?
He was. I was reading his some of the writing about him, and people that were in his world, like Heinlein, gave him money and helped him, and there was a lot of people attempting to prop him up in the science fiction community. But also, I think the balance is that you have, these nefarious bad actors that are in these agencies that are doing everything they possibly can to thwart your efforts and to drive you insane. And so there are certain people in certain points in their life where they are more valuable dead than they are alive.
Sure.
And I think it was very clear in his circumstance that he was way more valuable dead because he had done all of this writing and probably made some bad business decisions, some, bad deals that didn't protect him or didn't protect his legacy. Because in the time, if you don't have the understanding of what you're doing, you're just doing the work. You're not really looking at it as a legacy brand.
Sure.
You don't have agents around you like you do now that are like creating a brand identity for you before you even have any fucking content.
Sure.
So I think in his circumstance, and there's so many great writers and artists and musicians that fall in this category, that they get kind of in this controlled situation, and there's all these people whispering bad advice in their ears, and it ends up that they make other people wealthy and they don't enjoy the spoils of their labor. And so it seems like he fell into that circumstance in that situation. And if you are being targeted, as we have examined and explored with someone like Isaac Cappy, now I would never say Isaac Cappy was on the same level of genius as Phil Dick is, but here's someone who had clearly some outside forces that were fucking with him. And I think when you look at that and you say, okay, here's one guy who was, B, C, D grade actor who was getting fucked with because he's trying to expose something. And here's someone who's on the genius spectrum who is getting fucked with. Like, that just shows you the capacity that these nefarious predators have to ruin someone's life.
Yeah.
And, I think you can look at Tessa now, and the reason that Tessa is allowed to live is because she doesn't offer a threat.
Yeah, exactly.
In many regards. She's a fragile being in many regards. And so no one looks at it's like they've already got what they needed out of him. So they've kind of left her alone in many they may shut down a video, or she may have shoddy internet, but she's allowed to live.
Sure. But sort of in an age that, I don't know. I want to say that it's forgotten Phil and his work, but it's taken out of context, I think, is why it doesn't seem as important. And now it's a genre all in and of itself.
Yeah.
I think one of the differences, and this is coming from somebody who doesn't really know much about the science fiction world as far as the writers and their connections to their works or anything like that, but it seems like, from what I perceive from my very limited point of view, that what differs between Phil and his work and maybe other science fiction writers and their work is that a lot of it is autobiographical. He's talking about experiences that he's had that have been otherworldly or have really made him suspect that there's a lot more to reality than meets the eye, in a spiritual way, in a surveillance state way, in a technological way. Whereas I see many of these other science fiction writers, and again, I really am speaking from a place of ignorance, but only just from a cursory observation, are just more living and telling stories out of speculation, like flights of fancy. Like, I can take this idea and keep following the thread and write a story about where I think this seed, after I plant it, what it might grow into. It's more like a thought experiment. But what Phil was writing from was from experiences that he's had, and then all the places that took him mentally, physically, spiritually, and all of that. So I think that makes his work, that gives his work more weight than a lot of other science fiction writers.
Yeah, I don't agree. I mean, I have read his work. I've read Aldous Huxley. I've read Arthur C. Clarke. I've read, countless science fiction writers, and I would say they are actually doing the same thing that Dick did. I think he has had a renaissance. I think there's a lot of science fiction writers who are having renaissances, and now we're at this age where people are looking at the work not as science fiction but as more of a documentary. What I have found interesting recently is that George Orwell, for example, who has been a highly lauded artist and writer for decades, now there's some kind of tell-all book that's being released about him that says he was a misogynist and he didn't like gay people and he was a homophobe and basically trying to malign his character. And I think the reason is, again, it's bad publicity. It's people coming in and saying, oh, all these people have been comparing what's going on right now with 1984, so what do we have to do? We have to destroy Orwell. We have to destroy his character.
Yeah, sure. But what I'm trying to say with that was George Orwell writing books based on experiences that he'd had with visions of the future or something like that, or feeling like he was bifurcated between two timelines, and he was simultaneously living in modern day California, but also at the same time a certain era of Rome. Like, I don't see any of these writers talking about experiences like that. That's what I'm talking about. Like, Phil was writing from something that he'd experienced, and that set him off on these different paths. But these guys, other guys, it seems like, and I'm speaking from ignorance, were just conducting thought experiments and writing about those. Like, I could see if technology or the world keeps going the way that it is, that it could possibly end up like this, and that's where 1984 comes from.
Right. I don't know. I see it differently. I think that they were actually having their own versions of these experiences, and it's clear if you read work about them that there is a prophetic nature to their writing, and they're basically speaking from the time that they're in and saying, this is where we are at right now. If we continue on this road, this is where we will go, based on their own prophecies based on their own visions. So I think in order to do that type of writing, you have to be in more than one place.
Yeah, I don't necessarily think so, but it's okay.
Yeah, it's okay.
I know that it's okay. It's totally okay. I just don't think that you see what I'm trying to.
I totally do.
Okay.
I totally do.
I
got it.
And I don't know about the bio of any of these guys. Maybe they had religious experiences where they see hallucinations and feel like they're. I don't remember hearing anything about that, but
that's what Doors of Perception is about.
Yeah, it's about a drug experience. He's talking about him taking what's it called? Starts with an M. Mescaline. Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely autobiographical. That's, again, a different thing. He's not writing a science fiction story from that. He's writing about the experience itself. But that's not what I'm talking about. Anyway, it doesn't matter. And there's no need to get lost in this.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. I just don't agree with your perspective.
Cool.
But I do understand what you're saying. I think it's possible that if you dig into some of these other people's work, your perspective may change.
Very well may, for sure.
It's kind of like looking into Mary Shelley's writing or Lord Byron's writing. Like, these people were taking a shit ton of opium and tripping out and having these wild experiences and then writing about them. That's where Frankenstein was birthed. And so I think as a writer, I can understand how there is a direct a kind of channeling experience that's happening with the work. And I think that all of these people, unless you're talking, we could have this conversation for hours. I think it depends on who the writer is and the type of writer that. I don't think Chicken Soup for the Soul dude is having a religious experience and writing about it.
We saw a documentary where he was talking about doing ayahuasca.
Yeah.
I mean, chicken books for the soup. There's no chicken soup for the soul for the ayahuasca drinker that I know of. There may be, but many of, and I'm not trying to belabor this point, but many of Phil's experiences weren't drug induced. Like, there was the thing with his tooth and the drugs there, but generally it was just psychotic breaks, just like psychological trauma that he was going through.
There were a lot of drug related things. Like, he was taking amphetamines. Like, there was a lot of drugs.
He was
involved.
He was taking amphetamines because he got prescribed for his depression for a short time, and then he went off of amphetamines. That sticks, and Tessa has talked in interviews about, like, people think that he was this, but she goes on and on about how there wasn't that much drugs in his life. She said tonight, if you passed a joint,
he'd smoke it. Yeah, sure.
Anyway, Anyway, we'll get lost in the weeds.
But I can take MDMA once and still be able to access that place in my brain.
I cannot.
So I think that's the possibility, is that I'm not driving a flag into any point. I'm just saying I'm open to other possibilities, that there were other layers of reality that were happening for myriad writers, and that's what makes their work so good and stand the test of time.
Dave Barry, I think maybe. Irma Bombeck.
I love Irma Bombeck. I love her. I really did. Judy Blume. Those were my peoples.
Your comfort food.
Jack London. Like, look around us. How many books are in this room? I love books. I love writers, even the weird ones.
Even the self-help, non-committal meditation books. There's some squishy books in there. But
there are.
But that's just me.
Yeah. There are. That's true. I'm open.
I like to have a meteorite-esque, dense book collection. Like, I'd rather have 10 intensely fucking great
then
books.
let's get rid of The Idiot's Guide to Law.
To ethics.
Oh, that too.
Just get off the terminology. Just take the title away from it. It's just a basic breakdown of ethics. I want that. I want an easy primer for ethics.
The McDonald's of ethics.
Okay. Yeah. We're not going to start nitpicking books here because I'll pull off some real stinkers. You're just a book slut. Really.
How dare you? You're right. I am. I love me a good book. I got a whole gaggle of McSweeney's today, and I am fat sitting on 20s.
All right.
All right.
Speaking of books, you've got school books to get into, and I've got a podcast to edit.
Yeah.
Thank you all so much for listening. I'm sorry there wasn't video this time. I don't know. When the other person is on the phone, I think it's kind of silly just to have us looking around a room, not really talking to somebody visually.
Yeah.
I don't feel like you need to see us that much.
Yeah.
Maybe in reaction to somebody else who's also, you can see their reactions and so forth. That seems like it makes more sense.
Well, and it gave me the opportunity to
Pick your nose.
do some internet searching so I could seem smart to Tessa and give her answers.
That's ideally what should come before the interview.
How dare you?
Because it took you out of the present a little bit for a little bit.
It didn't. As she was speaking, I was looking stuff up so that I could speak to what she was saying. It actually didn't.
Okay.
I was right there. I was riding the Tessa wave, and it was freaking awesome.
Can you not check your email? Can you wait till we're off?
The only reason that I really wanted, and I'm being selfish, the only reason I wanted video is I wanted to roll with Tora. I was hoping that we could hang with Tora.
Thank you all so much for listening. Hopefully you enjoyed this as much as we did. Tessa will definitely be on again for sure.
Absolutely.
And yeah, it's you know what I'm going to say by now. There's great stuff coming your way. Just stay tuned. Keep your ears to the ground.
But keep reaching for the stars.
Yes. Thank you all so much for listening. If you would like to get a hold of us.
That's the third time you've said that.
Because I'm keep getting distracted. What are you doing? That's the only Tessa book there is right there.
Oh. It says there's 110.
Yeah. Anyway. Can we?
Yes.
Okay. Focus on what's right in front of us.
Sure.
If you'd like to get a hold of us to suggest guests or whatever, stop it! You can get a hold of us at themeltpodcast@protonmail.com.
Or you can reach out to me at hunter-muse@protonmail.com.
All right. Thank you so much for listening.
They really feel
it's,
you know what, it's Thanksgiving week, so that's why we're thanking you so much.
Yes.
For listening.
We love you.
We do.
Although this will come out probably in March. So seriously.
Well, maybe we can push her ahead in the queue.
Possibly.
See, there's one right there.
All right,
guys. Love you.
Much love. Farewell.